Hi everyone, this is Carol Keller, Independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator from Illinois in the United States, coming to you today with some alternatives for the November paper pumpkin kit, which is called Jolly Gingerbread. Here are some samples of the adorable little gift cards that you can make if you do the kit as is. So I'm excited. They have cute little envelopes and front and back is decorated. So for me, I put to and from on the card itself, the gift card holder and the envelope. But those are some of the options for what you can make if you do the kit according to the directions. But of course, we always like to have alternatives. So for today, I have done a card and a scrapbook page with the contents of the kit. So let's get right to it. Here is the card that I designed. I really wanted to use a lot of the stamps that are in the kit. That was my goal, and especially ones that weren't necessarily used for the cards, as you can make them as they come in the kit. So let's get started. Here is what I typically use, my Whisper White base layer, and I wanted to have a little border, so I used Shaded Spruce as my base layer. So we'll put that on right away. And as you know, I like to use my multi-purpose liquid glue when my layer is the same size as the card front, because it gives me a chance to move that layer around a little bit and get it right where I want it before the glue dries. Although it does dry pretty quickly, but I usually stand it up against it. So there we have our base layer. Put that aside, and then we are going to create, as I really enjoy doing, our background paper using the sentiment stamps from the stamp set that comes in the kit. And so I've gathered all of them, and my ink pads. I am using Real Red, Coastal Cabana, Highland Heather, Daffodil Delight, Shaded Spruce, and Blushing Bride. And I'll take them each one at a time and walk you through. Actually, I'm going to do it this way, I think, so you can see it a little bit better. So we will take the More Merry stamp and stamp that a few times in Real Red. And what I basically did was just kind of move the stamp around and about and going off of the paper so that it gives more interest, and it makes it look more like what you would see from paper that you get in a store. So just basically stamping a few times with each one. And for the sentiment with the Shaded Spruce, which I see on my sample you actually can't see very well, I used the same sentiment that I'm using for the inside, which is wishing you a jolly Christmas. So I think I'll do it on the inside first so that that is done. Make sure it's inked up. Gotta love photopolymer. So when you make a mistake, you can put it right on there. And again, just randomly stamping throughout. And next we will do the With Love with Blushing Bride. And so I really made it kind of my purpose to use some traditional colors, which you see with the Real Red and the Shaded Spruce, but with the Blushing Bride we're using some non-traditional colors. And the reason I did that was that I wanted to include, I think that's probably pretty good, I wanted to include different colors on the house, the gingerbread house, and make it kind of a little more fun, a little bit more like a gingerbread house would look. And so I incorporated the colors with that as well. We just need our Happy Holidays stamp, which we're doing in Coastal Cabana. And I actually thought I had grabbed Pool Party. That was what I was thinking initially, but then I liked the Coastal Cabana. I realized I kind of used it by accident, but I really liked the way it looked, so I kept it. Happy accident. let's see here, maybe this way. So my purpose is to kind of fill the front of the card with color and with the sentiments. And so for the last two, I'm using the two of the decorative stamps, the smaller ones that are in the kit, and again using the non-traditional colors for these. So I'm using Highland Heather on the first one. And I like this because it just kind of is a nice way to fill in. Maybe another one over here. We'll turn it a little bit. Got to add that interest, maybe one more here. And then last but not least, we're going to use Daffodil Delight for our last stamp. And I just goofed that up. That was the one I just used. Don't do that because I didn't clean it yet. We don't want that purple in with the yellow. And again, I'm just kind of filling in where I think it could use a little more color. Turn in the stamp a little bit to make it more interesting. I think that's probably pretty good. We've got our whole layer colored. I love to do this technique for a scrapbook page, and normally not necessarily with words, although you could, but with flowers or with whatever sea creatures, whatever stamps I have. It makes wonderful background paper that you can use with whatever colors you would like. In this case, I was very intentional because when I was designing the card, I did this second because the first thing I did was color in the gingerbread house. And so for that, I have a square that's 2 inches this way by 2 1/4 inches, I believe, this way. And I'm going to just stamp that in soft suede. So again, this is a stamp that comes in the kit, this cute little gingerbread house. Move that over just a little bit. Give it a good press. And there we have our gingerbread house. And I'm not going to color the whole thing in because that is very time consuming, but I am going to tell you the colors that I used. So I used crumb cake because I wanted a little bit of a distinction. When I made my first sample, I used crumb cake for the outline, but when I colored it in, there wasn't enough definition, so I went sort of up a level darker with the early espresso, or excuse me, with the soft suede, but I'm using the crumb cake. And you can absolutely use your Stampin' Blends with this, but I did not have the colors that I wanted, so I made the choice to color it in with the Stampin' Write markers, but certainly either one would work. The benefit to the blends is that it doesn't show kind of the coloring lines, which the Stampin' Write markers sometimes do. But the disadvantage is that the Stampin' Write markers will bleed through the back. Because if I wanted to, I could have, doing it this way, I could have stamped it right on the card and then just worked around it. But I decided to do it this way. So again, I used soft suede. I used Blushing Bride for the background of the house. I'll just show you a little bit of that because, like I said, I'm not going to take the time to color it in on camera. I will color it and then put it on afterwards. I used Coastal Cabana for the background of the door, part of it. So this part and this part. And then for the windows, I used Daffodil Delight to make it look as if the lights are on. And for most of this, I'm using the brush side, the thicker side, the brush tip. But now I'm using shaded spruce for some of the leaves, and for that I did use the fine tip just because those images are very small. And I went along the outline in green to give it a little bit more. I wanted it to have a little bit more green in there. And then the same thing for these sections in here. Just used my shaded spruce and then went over these outlines in the spruce as well. So very simple there. And then I used Real Red. And again, I used the fine tip to color in the heart. For this one, for the heart, you could probably use the, well, maybe I will use the thicker one. But there are some finer details in red that I will use the fine tip for. And this marker is well loved, so it's a little bit frayed on the brush tip, but the other one is fine. So all for those little red dots, or for the little dots, I colored them in with Real Red, and then the candy cane stripes here and on the windows. So here on the window sills, and then also for the door, the side of the door. And then last but not least, I used Highland Heather. Again, the fine tip for the top of the house and for some of the definition on the door for this part. And so what I'm going to do now off camera is color the rest of it in. But that's what you want to do, is just follow along with those colors. And of course you don't have to follow along with my colors. You can use whichever colors you prefer. But again, coordinating the colors that I used for the background with what I used here. So I will be back as soon as I finish coloring in the rest. And just a couple more tips as I finish up here. It's better to do the light colors before the dark colors so they don't have a chance to get muddy. Oops, and I realized I forgot my Coastal Cabana. I forgot to finish this piece. And just a couple more places where I wanted to show you which color I used where, just so that you are aware. One is that I also used Highland Heather on those, the detail on the bottom, and then the shaded spruce for the little dots here. And that is it. Our house is complete. And so the next thing I did was take my trimmer and cut it down so that I could mount it on a strip of Coastal Cabana. So I got it as close to that edge as I could on 3 sides where it's straight, where there are straight lines. So the top, or the bottom, excuse me, and the 2 sides. And for the top, you could even use your trimmer for part of it, but I just fussy cut it since there wasn't that much. Just following that outline of the chimney and the roof line. And there we have our house, our gingerbread house. And like I said, I took a piece of Coastal Cabana. So this one I believe is 2 1/4 by 2 1/2. Let me double check that. It might be 2 1/8. So actually that's right. It's the same size actually as the white strip, because then we cut around the edges. So that's right. Because we cut it off of the white, both the white piece that I started with and the Coastal Cabana piece are 2 inches by 2 1/4 inches. And then I simply used my Stampin' Seal and put the layers together. And then because I felt there was some blank space there, I used the More Merry stamp. I think this time I may even use With Love instead, just to see what that looks like with the Blushing Bride. So I'm going to pull that out again. And you don't have to. You could certainly leave it with the white space as it is. But I just thought that would add a nice little detail. And so our card is coming together very nicely. The next thing I'm going to do is put this layer on to our stamped layer. Just in the corner. And the reason I'm doing this first is it will help me to know where I want to put the placement of the ribbon. What I did for the ribbon is I used our wonderful Snowflake Splendor ribbon. which hopefully you can see is all shimmery and has sort of blues and purples and greens in it. And I colored it. And this time I did use a Stampin' Blend because it works better. The Stampin' Write markers tend, because they are water-based, if you get your hand is damp at all, it will come off and sometimes on the card. So I did do this in advance, but I'm going to show you how I did it after I trim the layer here. So all I did was just make it a little longer than that layer and adhere it to the back with some glue dots, one at each end that I can tuck then into the back. So I'm just laying my ribbon down, picking up each of the dots, one at each end, like I said, and then laying it because I didn't want it to cover the gingerbread house. So I put it just above that. And now our layer is ready to go on that card. So I'm going to bring in my Stampin' Seal again. And then you see I did the both separately. Sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't, but it's just easier to work with because when you do, the ribbon is a little bit stiff to begin with, and then when you color it, it also adds a little bit of stiffness. So it's just easier to work with instead of using one long piece. I used one for the front, and I am gonna tack it down a little bit, maybe, we'll see after I put the bow in because it's lifted up just a little bit. And so then again I have another section that I've colored, and I'm just tying the bow right off the roll because I find that easiest to do and has the least amount of waste. But it looks like, yes, I will need to color a little more, and that's fine because I want to show you how to do it anyway. All I did was take my Stampin' Write marker, and I used Cherry Cobbler because that's what I have. If I had Real Red, I would have used that just to have it be, you know, a match for sure, but that doesn't matter to me. I'm happy it's close enough. Our colors coordinate enough that it doesn't matter. That's all I did was lay some color, and it goes through to the back, so you don't have to worry about it. It dries pretty quickly. I am going to wait a couple of seconds here, but it does dry pretty quickly because it's alcohol based, so that you can use it almost right away. And I use the light Cherry Cobbler. We have a light and a dark in each color that we have, but this is the light Cherry Cobbler again, so it would be closer to that Real Red. And then I'm going to tie the bow and just make sure. Now it should be plenty long enough and colored where I need it. So I just get it to the, I'm going to start over again. I just kind of play with it. I like doing it this way because I can play with it and get it just how I want it before I cut it off. Yeah, that's better. And again, I'm not wasting any of the ribbon. Oh, perfect. Perfect length. Grab my scissors, cut it right there. Give a little trim there, and that's my only waste, is that little tiny bit, not much at all. And then we're going to adhere that. See, I've got a little bit of red on me, so I am going to, before I adhere it, make sure it's dry. Okay, yes, I am not seeing any color, so I think we're fine. So like I said, that dries pretty quickly, but not immediately, so you do want to take a little bit of care to make sure that it's dry before you start playing with it. Otherwise you'll get stray ink on your card where you don't want it. And again, I'm putting a couple of glue dots on the back, so I want to make sure, I want to use more than one because I want to make sure it's going to stay where I would like it. And that's our card. And actually I was thinking I would do a little bit, I think I'm going to pull those stamps out again, and on the inside just add a little bit more detail. So I'm going to take each of the little swirl stamps and I'm going to stamp them in Real Red, going back to those traditional Christmas colors for the inside. And I'm just going to stamp one on each side. I think we'll do it like this, and the other one like this. I love adding those fine little details that just gives it that professional look. And probably on the envelope, I would stamp the "With Love" on the back flap of the envelope, and again use those, and using the Real Red and the shaded spruce. But that is our card, so that's our first alternative from the kit. And next we're going to do a scrapbook page. For this, I actually use something that is considered to be a scrap from the kit. After I made my cards, I was left with a scrap that looks like this. From the outline, it's just the outline of where those 3 houses were. And it just spoke to me for a scrapbook page. I just thought it would make a nice detail to a scrapbook page. So that was, this was what started my idea. And let me show you the finished page, which is this, Home Sweet Home. And so I used it, hopefully you can see that at the bottom. But I thought originally I was thinking you could use it to make a page that shows, you know, making gingerbread men cookies with your kids or your grandkids. So you could also, just depending on what you title it, you could use it for that too. But I just like the house idea, and I thought, all right, if you're moving and you have pictures of your new house, you can make a page for that as well. So very versatile set. So let's get started, and I'll just show you how I did that one. And I have pre-cut everything to make it a little quicker. I've got my base layer, which is crumb cake. And I cut 3 strips. And actually I'm going to move this out of the way because we're going to need the Stamparatus, or excuse me, we're going to need the Stampin' Cut and Emboss. So I cut 3 strips, 1 1/4 inches each, of Real Red, Daffodil Delight, and Bermuda Bay. And for that Daffodil Delight layer, we're going to make a pretty little border, as you can see here. So we'll start with that. I'm going to pull in the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine so that I can show you exactly what I did. I love this wonderful machine. Let's move the markers out of the way. And we have our base layers, plates 1, 2, and 3, and then the other base, or the other plate number 3 for the top. I'm going to just put that here for a second because, again, I want to show you exactly what I did. I used our Ornate Borders dies, one of them, to make that pretty little filigree on the edge. And so what I'm going to do is lay it right up against the edge. So the edge here, if you can see that, this edge has to go right on the edge of the paper. And then I put it towards the top edge, and then I'm using washi tape to hold it down. I'm going to move it up just a little bit to hold it down on the cardstock as well as on the plate, because I want to make sure it's exactly where I want it so that it makes a nice straight edge there. And I'm going to run my plate through, or my sandwich through the machine. Love this machine. It's so nice and smooth. A little more. There we go. And just be careful when you take the washi tape off, just because if you're not careful and you pull it too quickly, sometimes it can tear the cardstock, and we don't want that. There we go. 1 and 2. A little stray washi tape there. We'll get that off. And the excess, I'm just going to pull just right there to get that out of the way as well. And there is the first half of our border. So I'm going to lay it right up there for a moment, and I'm going to just clean out the little bits, the little leftover bits with my Stampin' Die brush. And now we're going to pick this up again because I want to make sure that this flower is right in line with the one that's already cut. So if you just move it, let's see, if you move it around, you can usually feel when it pops right into those holes. which it looks like it is right now. So I'm holding that in place a little bit here and making sure both ends of the die are on the plate. I'm going to do the same thing with my washi tape, just lay it down right where I want it at both ends. So I know that it's going to be exactly where I need it to be. Oops. Let's make sure it just popped right up on me. We're going to try that again. And again, you can look from the back. But like I said, sometimes you can feel it kind of fall into place there, which is the ideal way to do it. And I'm going to grab my plate again. It's a little bit bowed, so that's why it's not cooperating completely, but I have it lined up all along the edge, so I know that it should be exactly where I would like it. Run it through again. And I'm going to take the machine out of the way and then pull it off, and hopefully you will see that it's lined up very well. Again, just taking care with that washi tape. I've used it a few times. I think it may be time to replace it. There we go. And we take this off. Look at that, lined up perfectly. And a nice straight line. And we've got just one little stray piece. I'm going to get that out of the way. And now our piece is ready to put on our scrapbook page. All right, so I'm going to pull it back in. And we're going to layer, starting with the Bermuda Bay layer. And I overlap them a little bit. And for this, again, I'm going to use my multi-purpose liquid glue. And then for the real red layer, same thing. And I'm going to overlap them just a smidge, because without them having been cut down by the dies, they're a little bit wider. Than the yellow layer, the Daffodil Delight layer. How does that look? Pretty good. And last but not least, the Daffodil Delight. And so the width of each of the borders is just about the same. So I wanted to add some color with the neutral background. And then next, I'm going to move this up to make sure you can see. I'm just going to adhere my little scrap of the house outlines. Again, using the liquid glue only because it's so narrow here. And so this one comes together pretty quickly. All right, so now I'm going to take my crumb cake ink pad. And now we're going to stamp each of the gingerbread houses and decorate them a little more. And I'm just using, again, crumb cake, little tone on tone. And then for the top of each of the houses. And before I do forget, there's a little bit of detail also in the white, because again, I wanted to give it a little more definition. And with the other stamp, this way. And then for the detail in the houses, I used more scraps. So when I made the original cards, I had popped out obviously the houses to use on the cards, and this is what I used for that layer, but I also popped out the star and the other items that normally you wouldn't use, but we are going to use them today, and then the doors, because I want my houses to have doors. And I'm going to move this to the side because we're going to do some coloring. because I didn't want them white. I thought that was too stark, so we're going to do some coloring just using our ink pads and sponges. So we're going to use Daffodil Delight to color one of the doors and the star. So I just have a section of my sponge. I always cut them into fourths because it gives you a lot of surfaces to use. So we're going to just dab, dab, dab. You can make them as dark or as light as you would like. And then the same thing with the door. Just adding some of that wonderful color. You could also swipe it across your ink pad, but I feel like this way I can control the color a little more. And I do want it to be fairly dark. All right, so there's our Daffodil Delight door and star. Next, we're using shaded spruce for the little window opening, I guess it is. We're going to use another side of this. Okay, so now I not only finished coloring all of the doors and the little trinkets for the top, I added some more shaded spruce to make these darker, and I added real red for these. And then I adhered them to the layer, just basically alternating the colors. And you could match them up with the colors of your strips or do them differently. For me, I wanted to do them a little differently, so I did, just to add a little more interest, but that's personal preference. So we've laid those down and we're almost ready for the title. But one tip I wanted to give is when you're using your Stampin' Sponges, the best thing to do is when you're finished, just rinse them underneath warm water and squeeze out keep rinsing until you see that the water runs clear. And then it takes almost all of the color out. For the pinks and reds, it will leave a little bit of residue, so then I just make sure I use that as pink or red the next time I use it. But the other sides will clean up really well, and you can use them basically for whichever color you want. So I rinse them out, squeeze all the water out, and then set them aside to dry, which they do pretty quickly, and then you can use them over and over and they last forever. Some people will mark the colors on theirs, but when you rinse them out like that, you don't need to. And it is a little messy. You can see I have ink on me, but that's all right too. All right, so next we're going to do our title. And to do the title, I pulled out some of my cardstock in each of the three colors. I'll pull out my sample so that you can see. So I had a strip of Bermuda Bay, one of Real Red, and one of Daffodil Delight. But before I cut the letters out, and then I used Whisper White, as you can see behind, and did all three words. But before I did that, I put some adhesive sheets on the back so that I wouldn't have to worry about messy glue when it came time to putting them together. So all I did was layer them, and I'll show you. You can see the adhesive sheet on the back of this one. It's harder to see on the white because it's almost the same color, but I just want to show you how to get it off. All you do is take your pick tool almost parallel to the table and just till it makes a little hole and picks it up, and it will pull the sheet right off, and you can put it then in the garbage. And your letter is ready to layer. So I just offset it slightly and put it down. And then I've done a couple of them already, and I will do all of them before I come back and show you. But I just had them about the same, showing about the same amount of white for each one. So do that with each one. And then I will be back and we'll show you how to put the title down. Okay, and now for the title, what I've done is I took the backings off of the white layer and I laid them out. First this word home, then this one, and then the word sweet in the middle, so that I knew it would be centered. And all of them are laid down except for the last one. And again, I'm just going to pick up the backing and take it off of that white layer, and then place it, making sure that it's even with the other letters. And then once you're done, you just press everything down into place, and there's the title. So that's the easiest way to do it, is to do the two end words and then center the middle one between them. You could even kind of stagger the letters so you don't have to worry about placement. I thought even about doing them home sweet home, but then I decided I didn't want to because I wanted room for photos. So I got the mats, and I made just 3 mats that I know I'm going to use to place my photos. And I'm just going to put those on again with my stamp and seal. And then last but not least, I added some embellishments from those cute little candy embellishments that are included in the kit. So I put a couple of them, one in each of the O's for home. And I used some down at the bottom here. And then last but not least, a couple on the mats. And for me, if I were doing this and really doing it as I scrapbooked, I'd put these on after I layered the pictures. So keep that in mind. You may want to do that last, but either that or put them outside of the mats. But there you have it. And I like to have odd numbers. So actually, and I'm going to use one more over here. I think maybe we'll use one of those. So then we have odd numbers. We actually have 9 on there because odd numbers are supposed to be more pleasing to the eye. So there you have it. There's our scrapbook page along with our card that we made. So I hope you liked that. Thanks for joining me today, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.